Hey, folks, welcome back to the LandFixer podcast. I'm your host, as usual, Logan Swanson, and today we are joined by the one, the only David Hansen. Say hi to everybody.
Hello, everybody.
Glad to have you on today. Thank you so much for
Very
being
cool.
here. Folks, as usual, if you need funding for any of your land deals, entitlements, subdivisions, rezoning projects, whatever it might be, as long as it is flat, i.e., no buildings, you can reach out to us at landpartnerfunding.com and we'll be happy to review your submissions. Also, if you're a landowner and you're just looking to partner with somebody who'd be able to bring you the best and highest value for your property, you can reach out to us. We can purchase it from you or we can JV with you to bring about its truest form. You can email me at thelandfixer@gmail.com. With all that being said, David, thank you for being here and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do for a living.
That's an open-ended question. A little bit about me. I am a civil engineer and a land planner. I started in 1988.
Wow. I was born in
Yeah.
90.
so, so I've been doing it a little over 35 years. Spent most of my career in the Washington, D.C. area, Northern Virginia, suburban Maryland, and further suburban West Virginia. I worked on projects in Northern Virginia, you know, 4,000 to 6,000 units, big master plan communities. I bailed from corporate life in 2004
Okay.
and went out on my own as a an owner's rep and developer. I spent 4 years, finding some great deals. I was working on some huge deals in West Virginia when 2008 hit and the market crashed. That was humbling. Lost everything, including a house.
Uh,
Um, and talk about a switch shutting off. I mean, that went from we had closed on a section on one of my projects one week, and there was supposed to be there. It was set up for three closings in three separate weeks. The second one never took place. The third one never took place, and that was when all Hades broke loose in the market. Everybody, everything contracted back to that metaphorical intersection of Main and Main, and the three big projects I had in West Virginia at the time, they were I still keep the paper. They were worth $9.5 million to me, and I didn't get it. But
uh.
uh, but the three projects just finished 2 years ago.
Oh, no
That
way.
yeah, crazy long story. Maybe we'll get into it. But what happened in 2008 is the banks had no idea what was going on. They had been so so sheltered from things and protected that when the market started to collapse, they were like, no, everything's fine. And it was just collapsing on their heads. And many of them took my two of my jobs in West Virginia. I think they took the worst decisions they could have. They actually called the notes, and I had two builders that were willing to continue building houses, albeit for less money. But they held firm. We were selling lots for 72,500 a lot, and the bank was getting 70,000 at each closing. So we got them out early. When the market crashed, NBR and Ryan Holmes said, "We'll stay in. We'll keep working through the deals with you, but we can only pay 55 a lot." And we had
Ooh.
finished lots on the ground. And yeah, the developer I was working with, who was pushing dirt on one of the jobs, was like, all in. Let's go to the bank. We'll sit down. We'll tell them it's going to be 55 a lot. They'll still get paid out. It may just take a little while longer. And and the bank, when we told them, the bank said, "Well, who's going to pay the extra 15?" And we're all sitting at the table looking around, and somebody went, "Well, nobody. You're just going to get 55." And the banker was like, "That's not good enough." Like, what do you mean that's not good enough? That's all there is. And they decided to call in the deposits, and those jobs probably sat until 2018.
I mean, there's no way that the bank, yeah, that must have been the worst outcome for the bank. I mean, what?
It was ridiculous. But the banks all thought it was such a crazy time. They all thought
Yeah.
that they had such leverage. I mean, I'll expand a little bit. So we were in the meeting with the guys from MBR and Ryan, and they had a $785,000 deposit up for the lots. And so the banker said, well, are you guys just going to walk away from your $785,000 deposit? And one of the execs from Ryan looked at the banker and said, "Do you read the papers?" And she was like, well, incensed, like, "Well, what do you mean by that?" And he goes, "We just walked away from a $25 million deposit.
Uh,
That, we're telling you we want to stay in this deal." I think the big lesson from that, and I say this often, is I learned a lot of things. Oh my God, I learned a lot of things. But probably the biggest lesson is, even when the market downturns like it did in '08, the builders didn't change what they did for a living. They're all the same builders: Porton, Lennar, Ryan, MI, pick one in the top 25. They were all building in 2008. They're still building today. They didn't
yeah.
they didn't immediately go out and go, "Hey, shipping looks like a good angle. Let's completely change our business model." They just figured out what worked in the market and worked around it. And again, I go, it's really unfortunate that that the bank, in my opinion, took such a poor decision to kick the builders out when that was their way to work through the deal. It was like there was nobody standing behind them that was going to rush in and do it. I just remember we stood out in the parking lot of the bank, and I'm looking at these, big executives. Some are super big now with NBR, and going, really, they were like, "Oh, that's all of them to a person went, we did not expect that outcome."
Yeah. So a lot of people are drawing parallels between 2008 and today, right?
Oh,
And I know
no, please.
you have your fingers in a lot of states, right? I mean, you're doing a few
Yeah.
projects here in Texas. One of them is ours. I know you're in. I was looking at one in North Carolina or Virginia over there.
Yeah, I got Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, Tennessee, and Texas.
Yeah. So do you keep your finger on the global pulse, or at least the national pulse of the industry, or what are
I
your thoughts here?
I do, and you know, I will say, thankfully, my projects are in, I chose early to work in right to work states, and states that historically gain population versus lose population.
Hmm.
Um, and that was calculated. Um, I've chosen within those states. I've tried to choose areas that are growing but not hyper active. Um, it's really difficult to figure out the hyperactive markets, and within a hyperactive market, you have more gradation of land types and building necessities. You really do see. I mean, you go to an area, in South Carolina, choose Charleston, and really,
Hmm.
it's really kind of funny. Charlotte, North Carolina, is like it. It is the main market for a ton of sub South Carolina markets because of
Okay.
its location. I mean, it's right on the border.
Right.
But if you were to look at Charlotte again, I know it's a North Carolina market, but it projects down into South Carolina. I really like South Carolina, and in Charlotte, you will see everything from A building sites to F,
Yeah.
and and it's real obvious, but it's not real obvious from the surface. Um, the haves versus the haves-nots, and you could find something that, oh my God, it's in Charlotte, it's a great market, it's doing this, but two seconds into the review, you go, oh my God, that is sub to anything. This, you know, it's very odd. What I find in in South Carolina though, I love Columbia, Aiken, Sumter, those cities. Um, the the disparity between those markets is not that great.
Hmm.
You'll have BC, maybe D plus,
Yeah.
but you don't see a lot of the uber poor. And I think it's more about the way those cities were, they grew up. You see more of the more super low value, low income things in the bigger cities.
Hmm.
It's kind of it's an odd thing that you stumble on. And for me, I haven't figured out how to monetize and follow and understand like the opportunity zones.
Hmm.
I know a lot of people are well versed in that. They read up on it. I've tried to stay kind of in the, you know, I don't necessarily want to be in the A market. That it's just it's one of those where it's really hard. You got to have a lot of money in, and you play in very tight margins.
Yeah, and it's
And
like more volatile.
it
There's a lot
it
more like
is.
people that are in the know, right? So if you're a newcomer to that market, you're more likely to fall into those very expensive traps that other people are aware of but may not talk about. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm right there with you. In fact, that kind of brought me to my first question for you, which is, all right, I was amazed, right? When we were introduced to you and we just sent over this, 35 acre flat piece of land. And then, I don't know, it was like a few hours later, you sent us a detailed, plan for the
Yeah.
property. You had a whole site layout.
It's the way I
All that
roll,
stuff
man.
happened very quickly.
Yeah.
Very impressive. And my first thought was like, okay, obviously we're just going to roll with what the zoning currently is, right? So it's just the, least amount of friction is what we're going with the city. And I wondered, is
Always.
that is always the case for you? Because I was wondering, like, okay, at what point is it worth doing the rezoning or things of that nature because the rewards are so great?
One of two things. It would either have to be so big or so small.
Okay.
If you're the challenge you run into is um, big rezoning. 9 times out of 10 on a big track, it's zoned ag, and you're
Hmm.
changing it anyway. And you're looking to create, if it's 150 acres, you're looking to create something of some mass. On the diametrically opposed to that is small. You find you stumble into a 3 acre piece with a ramshackled house on it, and everything around it, it's zoned R1 and everything around it's R6. And you
Right.
go, okay, where what I avoid are a piece like the one we're working on together, 34 acres. It's it is an it is a powder keg for every single individual out there opposing a rezoning. It just is. It's completely surrounded. It's zoned to the north. It's zoned to the west. It's got a main street running down the east side. It's it's probably got development coming to the south. And now you want to come in and go, we want to change this to, I don't know, R4, R6.
Hmm.
And you are just going to run headlong into, and I think the city staff knows it, but they're going to tell you what you can do. They're going to give you all of the, the flowery opportunities there. To me, the reality is, it is that size is ripe for setting up every single individual in that city to come out and oppose you.
Right. And
They
since
just will.
and
And it's
they're
a nightmare.
because not everybody in our audience is familiar, but rezoning is typically going to trigger a public hearing, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of different ways that your project can get jammed
It,
up.
Well, not only that, it's the difference between objective and subjective, right? So in a rezoning, everything is subjective. You're in asking for a favor.
Hmm.
And in exchange for that favor, what are you giving the jurisdiction? What are you going to give? I'm going to dedicate a park site. I'm going to do this. I'm going to provide, I'm going to take the road out front and I'm going to make it 6 lane. All these things that you're going to, in Virginia, they call them proffers, that you're going to proffer to do. You're going to pay every house that gets built. You're going to give the city $5,000 for transit or transportation or for fire and rescue. So rezonings come with this amalgamation of those things, and you are immediately set up for subjectivity. It's subject to the whim of the board. It's subject to the whim of the planning commission or the city council. And in all of those subjectivities, the planning commission is sitting up there on the DS, right? You're explaining your project. You're telling them what you're what you plan on doing, and you can see the look on all their faces. The guy who always asks for a contribution to this over here, and oh my God, I saw these great street lights when I was in New Orleans. Can you do gas street lights? Like what? But that's what you are. You're in this subjective realm of them reviewing. The ordinance then is open to subjectivity. I want this in exchange for that. So I like to work with objectivity.
Hmm.
There it's written. That's what I'm doing. And even if I have to go to a public hearing, it's an objective public hearing. I've been to public hearings in Alabama where people have gotten up and complained about one of our projects, and the chairman of the planning commission had to say, "We appreciate that. Thank you for speaking." And the person said, "Well, what are you going to do about it?" And he said, "Nothing. It conforms to the ordinance."
Right.
Nothing. I can't. I have to listen to you. I took it in. If we ever go to redo our ordinance again, we'll take all of this public comment and we'll add it. But at the end of the day, they are bound to approve it as long as you conform with what they ask. Kind of on our project where we've had that conversation. Like,
Yeah.
do you want to fight it, or do you just want to find the right outsource and utilize what the ordinance gives you? And I say, use what the ordinance gives you and ease the friction.
Yeah, I really appreciated that with the city. Or when we met with them, they were very clear about what would have to go in front of the board, and they were very clear, kind of, I mean, maybe a little tongue in cheek at times, but they were like,
Yeah.
"You don't want to fight. That's an issue you don't want to fight." Like the board is very firm on that. They would say things like that.
Which I'm shocked. Yeah, we had a great meeting with them too, and I'm shocked that they're that forward. Most planning and zoning staffs that I meet with, they're very guarded. They're not going to direct you one way or another like that group did, where they go, "Yeah, I wouldn't recommend that move."
Hmm.
They, like most of them are more, more of, well, if that's what you want to do, you go ahead and submit it. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Knowing like that is ripe for failure there.
That's funny. So when you're looking at a new project, or really, let's do it this way. So a lot of folks might be unfamiliar with the entitlement process in our audience. So if you were to like break up kind of a generic or a standard entitlement process into phases, how would you explain it to somebody who's maybe bringing you a project?
Sure. Okay, so the process for me is, and I'm probably different than most. I do. I like, I have a due diligence in the start, and I can do everything I need to do within a couple of days, and generally know where this thing's going to end up. Immediately following that, I seek out my builders. I do not wish to go down the process of in a vacuum. I did my due diligence. I hired these engineers. You'll learn when you're in this process. Engineers are consultants, and you pay a fee.
Mm-hmm.
They don't care whether your project is a success or not. They care whether you pay your bill.
Right.
That's it. They're not going to go, I don't think this is going to fly in that area. That's not where I would build that's not where I would build a 200 lot subdivision. Have you looked at the surrounding area? Do you know? So they got to remember that their bottom line is their bottom line, and they don't care whether your project works or not.
But builders are more in tune with the market, right? So they're going to tell
100%.
you, yeah, exactly.
If I'll use our project in Texas.
Go ahead, yeah.
If every one of the builders told me you've lost your freaking mind, I would tell you and Ryan, you've lost your freaking mind. That's it. No matter what you see around it, I mean, I'm working on stuff. Again, I do stuff all over the country, and I see things in different areas, and you learn different things through different lenses, so to speak. And so I learned long ago that the builders are, because they're the end user, right? They're the ones who, they've got the marketing department. The marketing department's got to support everything you're doing. So, and that's why I do things the way I do. I start out with that sketch. I get, whether it's you guys or somebody else or my own project, we all agree on it. Yeah, that works. And I detail out what the zoning specs are. And then I float it out to as many builders as I can get it in front of. And, and in there you'll find, we did one I got a little project in Smyrna, Tennessee. I sent it out to like 8 builders, and every one of them wanted the deal. They really did. And then I got offers like on a reverse bell, curve from here up to here. And from what I was asking, which I knew was too high, but I wanted to see where everybody was falling. But immediately I'm like, okay, that's a good project, because not a single builder said, not where I want to be building.
Yeah. So when you're working with the builders, they're going to start by, responding and saying, yes, we're interested. What I noticed is some of them are going to be like, hey, can you tweak the plans a little bit this way, a little bit that way, maybe to support product.
Yep.
And then they're going to issue usually an LOI if everybody comes to terms on something.
LOI, then a PSA. And so through the entitlement deal, like I said, I'm one of those guys. I like to lock up my builder early. I like to lock them up during the study period, because that means that it's not 100% sure, but it's about as close as you're going to get.
Mm-hmm.
And that'll allow you to move into, and again, I overlap a lot of stuff. So while I'm out with the builders, I'm also out with the engineers. I'll send the plan out to 3 or 4 engineering firms, depending on where we are. And it's interesting, in Texas, a lot of the engineers want to, they've got both engineer and survey in-house. Some of them will have environmental in-house.
Mm-hmm.
But they all have like a geotech that they like to work with, or this. And the other thing that they love doing, and I kind of appreciate it because it helps, and I get the same kind of treatment in Alabama, is they'll do a comprehensive proposal for me. They'll include everything. And for what I think is a super nominal fee, because the geotech will give the engineer a better price than he might give me directly, because he knows that the engineer is paying him and will pay fast.
Right.
And so my engineers usually mark up whatever fee they get by 10 or 15%. And to be real honest, because they coordinate it along with me, it's a bonus.
Yeah.
It really is. And so, again, so I overlap those two. While I'm out with the builders, I'm out with engineering. So when everybody starts to get back with us, we really know where you are. You've got a viable plan or a viable parcel from the builders, and you've already got all of your engineering proposals stacked up, so you can weed through them, figure out who's going to be the best, start negotiating on individual pricing and things of that nature. So you can kind of hit the ground running. I love to have all that taken care of earlier, and then sometimes start with some of the preliminary uh, consulting work that may have an impact on design and engineering, specifically wetlands and soils, like geotech. So I like to get those out of the way before before I get to the end of my study period. So I've already baked in, like if there's a wetlands challenge, I know where I got to avoid. I know where we're going to have crossings. The same with geotech. For geotech, really, in this day and age, what you're looking for is, the soil quality. Is it good enough? Is whatever's there in situ, is it good enough to be used for your on-site fills, pad fills, that kind of thing?
Or you have to be trucking in a bunch of stuff.
Or am I trucking in again, all those things make a deal, go with
the builders
deal.
Want to know.
Well, they do. And the interesting thing, and I'll use our Texas job, the two of the engineers that I spoke with, we went into depth, and they both agree with me. We're not going to need any haul in, or very little, if that, maybe a haul off job, but it should balance because we got enough, the way I plan it, there's enough open space for us to get rid of dirt. But those guys know from other projects in the area, soils are good. Everything on site will be usable. They'll be able to take off the topsoil, stockpile it, use everything from our, from trench excavation and the road boxes and stormwater management can all get flipped over, rolled in as lots, and they'll be able to make the site work.
Yeah, because if you have communities completely surrounding the subdivision and all the soil was good for those communities, there's a pretty good chance that your soil is going to be just fine, right?
There's a good chance, but you can't always lean that way. This one, because of just the way we already know where the drainage runs through this. I mean, this one's pretty well suited for yes. Some I'll go back when I say this all the time. All the easy land has been developed, not necessarily all the good land.
I see.
Easy.
Mm-hmm.
So, developers, jurisdictions, everybody's kind of smart. You'll see it. You wonder why. Why did that develop and not this? Oh, that was flat, and this has got a lot of topo. It just, like I said, easy goes first, and then, but not necessarily good.
So you get
just because it's a little more difficult to develop doesn't mean it's bad.
Right. So so I would say, backing up. So we look at the property, you put together some sort of design for it, read the code, find out what you think the best and highest use is, verify zoning, meet with the city, review the plans, right? And that was a pre-submittal meeting is what that was called. Will most cities do that for you? I'm assuming.
I've yet to find one that won't. Some have a more formal process than others. I've got a project right now in Tyler, Texas, where it's actually a fee. It's a feed review. You have to pay. It's a very detailed, more detailed than the one we're working on together. But it actually, they want to know you're serious. It's a fee.
Right. So. Then
some have more detail than that. I've got a big project in Augusta, Georgia, and it goes through a committee. It goes through it's a submitted, not a meeting. You don't go to the meeting. It's submitted. They send it out and they send you back. We got 3 pages of comments on it's 1,500 lots. It's a big project.
Yeah. Right. So the city kind of gives you a rough thumbs up, right? They're not going to say everything will be easy, but they'll point out some obvious flaws or things of that nature. Yep. Then you take that plan and any maybe modifications you make there, shop it to builders. Builders will tell you, yes, no, get out of here, you're crazy. And hopefully you get to a point where you have a LOI or a contract in place with a builder.
Yep.
And in this process, you're starting to engage engineers, which we've been doing. Uh, so, what typically in the entitlement process are all the studies that you usually need to get done in order to get the approvals from the city? You already
That's
mentioned
them.
geotech.
Yeah,
What
there'll be
else?
and I'll use Texas as an example. And for your project, we'll have a geotech, we'll have a phase one environmental, unless they find anything in that. I don't think there's going to be a phase two on this. It's just farm ground. Um, we'll have preliminary geotech study that'll be based on the road layout and lot layout that we send them. We will have a transportation impact analysis, a TIA. That'll determine whether we have any requirement for turn lanes or additional right of way or offsite improvements. If our development were to unnecessarily impact an intersection elsewhere, it shows up in the TIA.
Yeah, so they might say you need to add signage or maybe even stoplights or something like that at
I,
the entrance to the
I
community,
actually
turn
had them
lanes.
in. Yeah, I had them in on a project in Alabama. Tell me that our development caused an intersection to fail, and we needed to build a turn lane a half a mile away from our project. Until I went back at them and said, no, your intersection performs at a service level of D. Even after the 2 cars that I add to it, it's still at level service D, so it doesn't fail, and we're not going to do your turn lane. And then, but the builder had us under contract, got involved, and they were like, we've got another subdivision like right up by that thing. We'll take care of it. Right up by there.
That's
I'm like,
nice.
cool. All right.
Yeah,
So,
I also heard from a
because we were trying to get the plans approved,
uh-huh.
and I'll fight on something. That was stupid. So I would fight, because if I ended up with it, I was not going to do that. But my builder had another project closer to that intersection, and he's like, we need to get started construction on this deal. So we'll negotiate with the transportation department and make that. We'll take care of it. So, and
Right.
they did. It was pretty cool.
That is a good point to kind of bring up. The probably the most difficult part about development is, we're incentivized to get the project done as affordably as possible, right?
Right.
And, optimize for profits. But the city is somewhat the opposite, right? They're incentivized to garner infrastructure, or I mean even the individual utilities, all this sort of stuff. They're trying to, let's make the city greener because you're going to profit. So there's this like fascinating and difficult butting of heads that I guess is very common. And I've heard from most developers that it can be a real nightmare. But other times, certain areas and cities, it's not a big deal, and it's all spelled out in the law. Like they mentioned that we would have to have, what was it, $1,400 a lot for
Right.
future park
Park.
improvements and things like
Yep.
that. I mean, that seemed very reasonable.
But it's a
Um,
line item. It's a line item in their impact fees.
yeah,
So all the builders are aware of what the impact fees are there. They're aware of all the line items. And it's not, and it's paid when those impact fees are paid with when the builder goes in to pull a building permit.
hmm
So I didn't understand why that. I didn't understand that part of that conversation. I was like, why did you guys bring that up? You knew it was a not. I mean, it didn't even it didn't even apply to us, the option of donating a park,
hmm
because of the size of the project and the number of lots. So it was like that. That's another thing that you'll find in a jurisdiction. The the various groups and departments, if they don't have any comments or can't have any comments, will try and manufacture a comment. And that's what happened with that.
I have to
Yeah,
have
we
something
went
to
through
say
that whole
here.
thing, and I was just there scratching my head like, how big does the park have to be? Oh, 5 acres. Like 5 acres, that's like that's
Yeah.
you know, that's a chunk of our site. You got to be kidding me.
Right.
And then that's when the other person spoke up and went, no, it has to be over, I don't know, 250 lots or something. I went,
Hmm.
we're nowhere near that.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that you run into is, from my understanding, again, this is above my pay grade yet, but I've been learning a lot about developments, and it's apparently not uncommon for cities to try to get you to maybe overdevelop some of the utilities in because they're assuming that there will be other developments, say down the way that you're developing, right? So they'll say, hey, we need to size the sewer up above the capacity necessary for your development, but it's because we know that there's going to be future developments down that road. And you can get into a messy process where you have to say, well, what am I actually supposed to pay here? What's the city supposed to contribute? Yada, yada, yada. So it can get real messy that way as well.
See, yeah, see, I'm different as far as that goes. I tend to, and I'm actually going through that on a project in Columbia, South Carolina, where I think I'm one quarter of the four groups that are going to be responsible. But I said the city's being short-sighted by only telling us we're designing. There's a lift station. It's at capacity,
Hmm.
and we have to build a new one or design and make happen a new lift station. And when we were in the meetings with the city was like, well, just size it for the discharge that your four developments are going to have. And I'm like, that's freaking ridiculous. Size it for the shed or design it to be upgradable for the shed.
Right.
And the city was like that was the strangest thing they'd ever heard. But see, I come from, but see, I spent, 20 years as a design engineer
Yeah.
and, you know, a, a private sector design engineer, but we always, that's just intelligent design and would be intelligent growth. Um, so I always look at on any of my projects, if I'm looking at the sewer, unless it's isolated and tertiary, which means it's designed to serve a certain area,
Hmm.
period. Just because of topography or something else, then that's fine. It is what it is. But like if I'm at the edge of the river and there's 10,000 acres above me, then the sewer line that runs along the creek should be a trunk line. It should be big for
Hmm.
everything. It should be sized for the entirety of the shed, not just what I'm working on. Um,
Yeah, you should have some foresight into the future of that area.
they,
Yeah.
and everyone should. And the difference, most intelligent jurisdictions have, if you have to design like a trunk line, say you had to design a 36-inch sewer to get through the main part. What they'll do is the difference in cost between the 8-inch and the 36-inch, you get reimbursed.
Yeah. Right, exactly. And that's when you can work hand in glove with a city and those relationships
Yeah.
can work really well. But sometimes those will come in
I,
collision.
yeah, but I think you make that you make those collisions sometimes on your. It depends
Really?
on where you want to. Yeah, I think it depends on where you want to throw the gauntlet down. You know,
Right.
I mean, what sword do you want to fall on? For me, if a city tells me, and it was cheap, that I mean, inexpensive, relatively speaking, for the project, that turn lane would have been like 120 grand. But it was the principle, like, no, if you can make me build you a turn lane a half a mile from my property because I add one turning movement to that intersection that's already not functioning, then it just that's one of those where I go, nah, then you can open any can you
Yeah.
want on my
Where does it
project.
stop? Yeah.
You got to know. I mean, again, if it were something to and actually, okay, on that same project, I had this conversation about upsizing. We had to pay $600,000 to extend an 8-inch sewer line, 5 miles.
Oh, jeez.
And I asked and this is in Alabama, and the although it's called Baldwin County Sewer, it's not owned by Baldwin County. It's privately owned, and I know the owner. And I was on the phone with him and I said, I cannot believe that, you know, I'm building this whole 8-inch sewer, right?
Uh-huh.
I said, I only need like a 3-inch. I should be getting reimbursement. And he laughed. He goes, yeah, I wish you luck in trying to get that because it would come from him. And I went, but his name's Clarence. He's a nice guy. I've known him for years. I was like, but Clarence, seriously, you are going to make money off that 8-inch line. And he goes, yes, David, that's what I'm in business for, to make money. And I said,
Yeah.
but I'm the one paying to extend it for 5 miles to my property. And he said, yes, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, we were just talking about that with my me and my team doing the Tennessee development. We were joking about how, like, man, it is quite the grift to have some
Yeah.
developers come in and pay for all your infrastructure that then you're going to profit off of the rest of the
Yeah.
existence.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, it does. It happens. So you just, it depends on the circumstance. Again, I go back to it depends on, what, what hill you want to, die at the bottom of or sword you want to throw yourself on.
hmm yeah, well, we're near the top here, David. I feel like we might
Yeah.
have to have a part 2 and a part 3 and a part 6. I don't know. We'll see.
Your call, man. Anytime.
Well, if anyone wants to reach out to you, they have any projects they want you to look at, is it best to email you or what should they do?
Yeah, that's fine. They can email me. It's David at Open Land Communities, spelled all the way out, .com.
Awesome. David, I
Yeah.
really appreciate your time today. I know you got a lot of
Anytime,
crap on
Logan.
your plate that you got to attend to, and I'm sure we'll be talking later. We got some stuff as well. So,
Good deal.
folks, just a reminder, if you need any funding for your land projects, check us out at landpartnerfunding.com. And folks, we'll see you on the next one. Cheers.